So here's the little twist that I was talking about earlier. This is a new project, which is our fun Christmas tree wall hanging. And this looks like a completely different pattern than our Trip Around the World table runner that we just finished. But I want you to know that this is pieced exactly the same way. We pieced this on the foundation exactly the same way. Right here, here's our quilt layout. This is also a 2-panel project. But we're doing something a little bit different. As you can see, we are bringing in half square triangles. And when you bring half square triangles into your piecing, the sky is the limit. So I'm going to show you 3 different ways to make half square triangles, and then you can choose which one you like the best. The first one that I want to show you is how to make 1/2 square triangle. So remember that we are creating our project out of a 2-inch square, cut square. So what I have here are 2 2-inch squares. I've taken my marking pen and I've drawn a line from corner to corner. Now again, this is going to create 1/2 square triangle. So we're going to take this over to the sewing machine. When you're creating 1/2 square triangle out of 2 squares, you are going to sew on the marked line. Now I put some red thread in here so that we can see the stitching really well. So we're just going to sew right on that marked line all the way through. This is a great technique if you want to go really scrappy, or you just need that one more 1/2 square triangle. And when we sew that line, then we are going to cut a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I've lined up my ruler right on that sewn line, and then I'm going to cut a 1/4 of an inch off. And that's going to make 1/2 square triangle. The downside to this technique is that we've got a little bit of waste. And you know how we hate wasting fabric. So the next one that I want to show you is we are going to make 2 1/2 square triangles out of 2 squares. And this is a great technique because we're taking our cut size, which is 2 inches, and then we're adding a 1/2 inch for seam allowances. So these are 2.5 inch squares, right sides together. I have marked my line from corner to corner, right down the center, just like we did before, but we're going to do something a little bit different. So when we are ready to sew, we are going to sew a 1/4 of an inch away from that line. So we are not sewing on the line, it's a quarter of an inch away from that line. And so I have got the 1/4 inch piecing foot on my sewing machine, and the edge of that foot is a 1/4 of an inch away. The edge of the foot is a 1/4 of an inch away from where the needle is. Some people like to actually mark the sew line. So you would mark the center line, and then you would mark a 1/4 of an inch and a 1/4 of an inch. So you can either go by the foot or you can mark the line that you want to sew on. So again, I like to start these out slow, and we're going to go all the way down. And now we're going to turn this around, and we're going to sew on the other side. So a 1/4 of an inch away from our marked line. Easy to see in that red. So let's cut that. Now on this one, we are going to cut right on the marked line. Okay, so this one we are sewing away from the line, and then we're going to cut right from corner to corner or right on top of that marked line. And this is going to give us 2 1/2 square triangles. That's slick. This is a great technique also for the Christmas tree because this is a real scrappy project. So if you want to use a lot of different fabrics, this is a really fun one. Now my personal favorite is this technique is going to give us 8 1/2 square triangles. And I love this technique because a lot of quilt blocks, especially quilt blocks with stars or similar patterns, call for 8 half square triangles in that block. So I love this technique. This one, we are going to take our 2-inch cut size for this project. This is the formula. Our 2-inch cut size times 2, which is 4 inches, and then we're going to add an inch for our 4 seam allowances that we're going to be sewing onto this. So on this technique, we're taking 2 5-inch squares, right sides together, and instead of just one line, we are marking a line from corner to corner and the other corner to corner. So we're marking an X right through this block. And the sewing part I have already done. For this, the sewing is 1/4 of an inch away from our marked line on both sides of this X. So we're going to sew 1, 2, 3, 4 seams. Now, do you see how this is just a little bit wrinkly because I've sewn lots of directions? So when I make this one especially, after it's sewn, before I cut, I do like to just come and set this seam with an iron. Get that nice and flat. That look nice. Okay, so the cutting for this technique, I like to kind of think of it as cutting a plus sign and an X through this. I think it's easier to cut through our square. Do you see where the sew line crisscrosses right here and here? That's where we're going to line the ruler up, right through that, and cut through there. And then we're going to come this way where these two crisscross, and we're going to cut it this way. Now before we separate these, get those, scooch those back. Before we separate these, we are going to cut right on the marked line. So we're going to cut right through here. I'm going to have to scooch my ruler up here. And now we're going to cut right on that marked line through this way. And look at that. We have 8 half square triangles. And it took us about the same time as the technique to make 2 of them. So now I want to show you how I like to press the half square triangles. Let's see if our iron nice and hot. We have a little bit of steam. Have you figured out by now that I really like steam? So this is the way I like to press the half square triangles. Typically with a half square triangle, we're going to have a contrast. So just calling it a dark and a light side. And so when we are pressing a half square triangle, we want that seam allowance to be pressed towards the dark side. And so if you always just have the dark side up, then when you press it, the seam allowance is always gonna go the right way. I like to just set that seam, and then again, kind of with the nose of that iron, I just flatten that out. And then as I'm just letting that sit there, I grab the next one, lay it on top, set that seam. Maybe this might seem like a little bit of overkill, but there's nothing better than a nice flat half square triangle. So, and the other thing, sometimes when I'm ironing half square triangles, I have them spread all over my pressing board, and this lets me be in just kind of a nice little row and really presses those out nicely. So we're going to finish that out on all of those. Isn't that fun? So after you've pressed your half square triangles, then we just want to double check on the size. And so the term that we say a lot is squaring these up. And so I like to bring this over to the mat. Now there's a lot of different rulers out there. This is just a nice little ruler because it has the line right here that I can line up along the seam of my half square triangle. And I want a 2-inch, and so I line this up along that 2-inch mark, and then I just take that rotary cutter and I'm going to clean that edge up. And then I'll just take my little scissors and just snip off that dogger. You could do it with the rotary cutter too, but this is just nice and fast. So now we've got a nice 2-inch half square triangle and ready to put into our project.